بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حميم تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز الحكيم ما خلقنا السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إلا بالحق وأجل مسمى والذين كفروا عما أنذروا معرضون.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue with Surah Al-Ahqaf and ayah number 27. Ayah number 27 from Surah Al-Ahqaf. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who comprehend the words of Allah, to benefit from it. This is al-ilm al-nafi', this is the benefiting knowledge, this is the haqq, the truth, that there's no doubt about it whatsoever. And if a person turns away from the Quran, then he is turned to deviation. Turning away from to. There's no such a thing as turning away from and then a person becomes idle or some neutral zone. It doesn't work this way. Either this way or another way. As mentioned even last night with how the people of Bani Israel, when they nabadhu kitab Allah, they turned away from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so the punishment was to be diverted towards worse. This is one of the things that Imam Sa'di rahimahullah mentioned here before we start, which is one of the ways of Allah, that if someone turns away from something that is benefiting from him and he has the means to do it, the punishment is that he would make him be busy with the opposite. If someone turns away from the tawheed, he'll fall into shirk. If someone turns away from an act of obedience to Allah, he will be busy with disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is how then the more the person gives one's attention and one's effort to the book of Allah, then the more the person is protected by the will of Allah from ad-dalal, from the deviation, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, and as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, when he said abshiru, with regards to the glad tidings about the Quran, طرفوا بأيديكم وطرفوا عند الله من تمسك به فلن يضل بعده أبدا. That it's one end of it is with Allah, one end is with you. And whoever hold fast to it, he would never be deviated. But holding fast to it, this is now the job that needs to be observed. So ayah number 27 and 28. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ولقد أهلكنا ما حولكم من القرى وصرفنا الآيات لعلهم يرجعون فلولا نصرهم الذين اتخذوا من دون الله قربانا آلهة بل ضلوا عنهم وذلك إفكهم وما كانوا يفترون. I'll read the translation of both ayat first, inshallah. And we have already destroyed what surrounds you of those cities, and we have diversified the signs or verses that perhaps they might return. Then why did those they took besides Allah as deities by which to approach Him not aid them? But they had strayed from them, and that was their falsehood and what they were inventing. So this is the mathal, after the mathal of the people of Ad that was previously mentioned with their messenger, and that mathal or that parable is a repeated one from one nation to the other. And as every messenger was sent and they were not bid'an min al-rusul, it was not a new thing for them. There were messengers before, messengers after. So the same thing, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the same way till the day of judgment. And once the final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent, the same thing applies, and the same fate also applies for those who believe versus those who disbelieve. So the ayah here, the first one, وَلَقَدْ أَهْلَكْنَا مَا حَوْلَكُمْ مِنَ الْقُرَى وَصَرَّفْنَا الْآيَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, يحذر تعالى مشركي العرب وغيرهم بإهلاك الأمم المكذبين الذين هم حول ديارهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning the mushrikeen of Al-Arab and other than them, because Al-Khitab was addressing someone specifically in the Quran is not necessarily specific for them. Because if it's others can be the matter can be applied to them, so that means them and others. And this is a well-known style of speaking, that a person would speak to someone specifically, and he means him and other people, or means even sometimes others. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, لَإِنْ أَشْرَكْتَ لَيَحْبَطَنَّ عَمَلُكَ وَلَتَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. If you associate partners with Allah, your deeds will be ruined, rendered in vain, and you become among the losers. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he no way impossible that he would fall into shirk. So this is the khitab, or addressing the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, but what is meant is other than the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. If that's the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the khitab is to him is like this, how is then the affairs of those who other than the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? And sometimes it's to a group of people, but what is meant is them and everyone else. As فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the original ones that heard this were the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. If they believe in the same of what you believed in, then they are guided. And then whoever follows them, the same thing applies here. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning and reminding them of how He destroyed the nations that denied the truth. الَّذِينَ هُمْ حَوْلَ دِيَارِهِمْ. And they see, this is those who are around their dwellings and their cities, and they see the remnants of these people. As the people of Ad and Thamud, and they would pass by Diyar Ad, and it's still till today is present, and how they carved their homes in the mountains. بل كثير منهم في جزيرة العرب. Many of them are in the Arab Peninsula. كعاد وثمود, like the people of Ad and the people of Thamud ونحوهم. وأن الله تعالى صرف لهم الآيات. So وَلَقَدْ أَهْلَكْنَا مَا حَوْلَكُمْ, what surrounds you, من القرى, from the cities, وصرفنا الآيات. صرف لهم الآيات أي نوعها من كل وجه. صرف, that means he changed or made the different ayat, not just one ayah, but it's by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make and to give different signs, different evidences, so that if someone is stubborn about one, then what about the other evidence, and so on. And all of the ayat has only one objective, and that is for people to stay away from a shirk and to be upon the tawheed and to follow the messengers of Allah. That's the entire ayat. Universal ayat, physical ayat, religious ayat. All of that is to establish the tawheed, to be protected from shirk, to stay away from it, and to follow the messengers of Allah. And that's why the tasrif, it comes from something, التغيير, التبديل, something is changed, something is exchanged. And actually the sarf, the subject of a sarf deals with the word itself and how it changes, how it ibdal, qalb, it keeps on, the letters are changing from one to the other, that gives different meanings to it. So when it comes to even, comes from something that is pushed away. الصرف is al-ibad, someone saraftuhu, that means I kicked him out, I removed him away. So here it shows not kicked away. وصرفنا الآيات, that means gives the meaning of al-bayan. When you separate things and you give many different kinds of evidences and things like that, then things becomes even clearer and clearer, so that it fits everyone. Everybody can understand these types of evidences. So أي نوعها من كل وجه. التنوع is the diversity. That's what even mentioned in the translation. The diversity of the evidences, not just one, different kinds. For what reason? لعلهم يرجعون, so that they would return. يرجعون, return عما هم عليه من الكفر والتكذيب, away from what they are upon of الكفر والتكذيب. So الكفر والتكذيب, sins, all different levels, the worst and the least of evil takes the person away from the mercy of Allah, from the pleasure of Allah, from the Jannah of Allah, physically and non-physically. So repenting to Allah, if a person embraced the deen of Islam, he returned, right? This is his original place, but he took himself far away. He's returning back to his fitrah, to his pure nature, to the what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from him. If a person commits sins, he returns with a tawbah. A tawbah is the meaning of tawbah, repentance is not repentance, it's ruju', is returning to Allah. So this concept of returning, right? If you follow the meaning of returning in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, anytime you are in state of some form of return, remember the overall meaning of return. Even as we know the dhikr of returning back from traveling. When the Prophet ﷺ, he would say the dhikr of traveling, the normal one, but he would add to it when he's returning, he would say ayibun, ta'ibun, abidun, rabbina hamidun. Ayibun, we're returning, ta'ibun, repenting to Allah. The return from what you were going to travel reminds you of the real return, which is the tawbah to Allah, that the person has to be constantly returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ, this is what makes all the objective of all of the ayat. So even when this is for the disbelievers and for the believers, when you see an ayah of the Quran, the benefit of it makes you return to Allah. Because the ghafla, the forgetfulness, takes us away. And then the person listen or sees an ayah, he get into that sense of returning to Allah. That's the real joy of this life. And the same thing with physical ayat, makes him return to the dhikr after he was in the state of ghafla. So returning from ghafla to dhikr, returning from ignorance to knowledge, returning from sins to obedience to Allah. Everything is returned. So this is every benefit that a person benefits from the entire deen of Allah. From the ayat of Allah, it's all about the return. And it's made so clear so that people would return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لعلهم يرجعون. فلولا نصرهم الذين اتخذوا من دون الله قربانا آلهة بل ضلوا عنهم وذلك إفكهم وما كانوا يفترون. But he says here لعلهم يرجعون عما هم عليه من الكفر والتكذيب. فلما لم يؤمنوا, when they didn't believe, with all of these ayat, with all of these examples that are mentioned, and this is not the first surah that was revealed. Many surahs revealed the entire Quran. Imagine someone reads the Quran from the beginning to the end, and he reflects upon it, understand the meaning of it, and after all of that, he's still in the state of disbelief. Which is, if the warning comes, this is the message. Read it, reflect upon it, and after you finish reading it with being truthful with yourself, then we'll see. One surah is sufficient. One ayah sometimes is sufficient. But it shows then, after the matter has been made very clear, فَلَمَّا لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا أخذهم الله أخذ عزيز مقتدر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seized them, these nations before. أخذ عزيز مقتدر, the seizing or the punishment of someone that is mighty, able to do all things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ولم تنفعهم آلهتهم التي يدعون من دون الله من شيء. These aliha, these idols, these images, these human beings that they worship besides Allah did not benefit them whatsoever. And this is the case for anyone that his heart is attached to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, وَلِهَذَا قَالَ هنا, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that here, فَلَوْلَا نَصَرَهُمُ الَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ قُرْبَانًا آلِهَةً أَيْ يَتَقَرَّبُونَ إِلَيْهِمْ. They seek their pleasure, closeness to them. This is what they used to return to their aliha, to these idols. وَيَتَأَلَّهُونَهُمْ, and they would worship them besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِرَجَاءِ نَفْعِهِمْ, hoping for the benefit that they would get from them. And as we know that لولا is حرف امتناع, as they say, like if especially when it comes after it a verb, فلولا نصرهم. When you see لولا as in linguistics comes after it a verb or a جملة فعلية, that means this is one of the forms of a تخصيص, something that is very special, something exclusive. That means it makes the تخصيص of the doer of this verb that comes after لولا to attain that verb. So فلولا نصرهم الذين اتخذوا, the victory here, or the seek, what they seek is the help from the idols. So when the punishment comes, this is the specific thing that they would be in need of, the help to be saved from the punishment. And these idols, they would never do anything of that nature whatsoever. So if they're not going to help them, that means what's the point of فَلَوْلَا نَصَرَهُمُ الَّذِينَ? Like, trying to explain this, like when you as the ayah says, as if it says, why not they help you? Why those who that you worship besides Allah, why don't they then help you when the punishment of Allah comes? Is it acknowledging that the idols would help? Of course not. But in a sense, the word فَلَوْلَ نَصَرَهُمْ, that means this is what you were focused upon. This is what you thought that they were upon this. So this is what's special for these idols as you thought. So since they are not of any mean of help whatsoever, that means فَلَوْلَ نَصَرَهُمْ here is, the purpose of it is at-tawbih, is to scold them, is a punishment by itself. Right? You can say that when someone was so dependent on something and you warned them from it, for example, and then that thing that he depended on, a friend, for example, that your son would say, "Oh, this friend is such great; he's helping me." No, this friend doesn't know anything. Leave him, stay away from him. No, he's good. And then something happens, and he discovered for himself that he was no good whatsoever. Then he would say, "What happened to your great friend that was supposed to help you?" You're not saying that he's great friend that he's supposed to help you. You're saying it in a way to make him learn, of course. But in the hereafter and the punishment, that is an everlasting punishment. There's no point of learning here. It's all punishment. But for those who would read it in this life, this is for them to learn that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to seek help from. So because there's no point of for them benefiting at that moment. So بل ضلوا عنهم فلولا نصرهم الذين اتخذوا من دون الله قربانا آلهة. They besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, الذين اتخذوا من دون الله, they took besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قربانا. Al-Qurban is something that gets a person closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when they said ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا, that's what قربانا comes from. Al-Qurba, from Al-Zulfa, from being close to Allah. Qurbani, like this. So they took Qurbanan aliha, that means they took these aliha as a way for them to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to help them when the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes, things like this. بل ضلوا عنهم, but rather what happened is ضلوا عنهم. And the fact of the matter is they deviated away from them. Now dalal is the opposite of guidance. So that means they lost. They were not the ones that would give them help. فَلَمْ يُجِيبُوهُمْ وَلَا دَفَعُوا عَنْهُمْ. They did not respond to them when they invoked them besides Allah. They did not push away the harm from them. وَذَلِكَ إِفْكُهُمْ وَمَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. And this is their ifk. Al-ifk is the kadhib. He says وَمَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ, and what they used to make of lies. So he says here من الكذب, from the lies الذي يمنون به أنفسهم. It's all a big lie, and they would discover that when the punishment comes. That they would يمنون به أنفسهم, they would give themselves this hope, this false hope. حيث يزعمون أنهم على الحق, when they claimed or assumed that they're upon the truth. وأن أعمالهم ستنفعهم, and their actions will benefit them. فضلت وبطلت. So it becomes deviated, and بطلت, it becomes falsehood. So فذلك إفكهم, and that's after فلولا نصرهم. So then this is what really the reality of it. And whoever claims that other than Allah would get them closer to Allah, shirk and these matters, this is all the lie that they were upon. Lie that they would think that would benefit them. And al-iftira, or as it says وَمَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ, which is a type of lying. Al-iftira is also lying, and it's making up things. So the person, whatever he says it, whatever a person is believing in it. So and that's more general than al-kadhib. So al-ifk is one specific, al-iftira is more general than this. And as Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he says in the ayah, فَهَلَّا نَصَرُوهُمْ عِنْدَ احْتِيَاجِهِمْ إِلَيْهِمْ. Should they then have they, هَلَّا is للتحضيد, like should they give them victory and aid them when they needed them? بل ضلوا عنهم, but rather they deviated away from them, they turned away from them. أي بل ذهبوا عنهم أحوج ما كانوا إليه. They turned away from them the most time that they were in need of it. وذلك إفكهم. The fact that they went away from them, because how would a person expect a lie that he made that would benefit him? It's a lie that they made. They made up all of these lies. So it has no reality to it, does not exist. إن هي إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان. These are names that you made up, you and your fathers and forefathers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not bring down any sultan, any authority of this. That's why any human being, it's something very easy and straightforward. When it comes to the deen, when it comes to the belief, when it comes to anything that you want to save yourself in the hereafter from the punishment of Allah and to be among the people of Jannah, you have to have sultan. You have to have authority over it. The authority is not your reason. Your reason can be, as we see, people are deceived. Iblis deceive people. Your reason is your desire, not what you think is your reason. The sultan has to be sultan al-wahy, the revelation from Allah. This can be the thing between the person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is no way a wahy, even altered wahy, can approve to the people to establish their religion based on falsehood and worshipping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Either they would lie and it becomes very clear, or it's not as what they think. It's all fabricated things and they would manipulate them. So وذلك إفكهم وما كانوا يفترون. He says أي كثير أي وافتراؤهم في اتخاذهم إياهم آلهة. When they took these idols as آلهة. You would find the iftira is, it feels good, it makes sense. This can mean this or mean that, has no clear ayat. And the ayah, the ayat is mentioned in the ayah. The ayat are clear signs from Allah. Worship these آلهة. Where is, in any book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, would say to the people, worship these idols besides Allah. Go to the graves and ask them besides Allah, because it will get you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Worship prophets of Allah. Like this. They have to look into things and twist words and make things that seems to be. And look at the Quran. If you want to know what ayat means, learn from the book of Allah. Anybody reads the Quran, he would not have any doubt whatsoever what the Tawheed means, what the Shirk means, things like this. وقد خابوا وخسروا في عبادتهم لها واعتمادهم عليها. And they have ruined themselves as a result of that. Then after that, the next verses will talk about the jinn when they came to the Prophet ﷺ and they listened to the Quran and how they believed and they followed the truth. So we'll stop here, inshallah. If you have any questions or anything that is not clear, we can talk about that, inshallah. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم.